Do I see another hand? Yes.
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, you have, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have some background in the New Left movement. And I was wondering if you had a very different view of Jefferson back in the day, and if so, how your view has evolved and changed, and what factors have caused you to reconsider him.
I'm asked if it's true that I have a New Left background, and if so, whether evolving away from that has changed my attitude to Thomas Jefferson. Would that be the force of your question? Well, actually, I'm young enough to have been Old Left, as well as old enough to have been New Left. I mean, the New Left Review, I had a lot of friends. I've sometimes written for it, yes. But some of the definitions of New Left I wouldn't cover me. I mean, SDS and so forth wouldn't. But yes, I still think like a Marxist, and I was one, or am one. Certainly was one in a socialist sense for most of my life. And the attitude to the American Revolution was actually the one thing on which the left never made up its mind, strangely enough. I think because they thought it had been superseded by more modern ones. Wasn't true of Marx, as a matter of fact. Or Engels. I mean, Marx and Engels wrote that repeatedly that the great country of backwardness and superstition and tyranny and ignorance and barbarism was Russia, and the great country of the future and of equality and liberty was the United States. And they were particularly strong in their defense of Abraham Lincoln, organizing movements in support of the Union in Europe. Henry Adams in his memoirs says Marx was almost their only friend in London at the time. Advising Lincoln, he wrote several pieces about it for Horace Greeley's New York Tribune, advising Lincoln to fire General McClellan, pro-slavery, stressing the importance of ironclad ships over sail, the superiority of capitalism over feudalism and slavery, and the rest of it. Very, very interesting. But there is another strain in, and very much not what they teach you in school. I have the feeling that probably it's not taught in American high schools that Karl Marx was Lincoln's best friend. Would I be right in this surmise? Yes, I think so. And that Lincoln thought so too. But there is another strain in the left, which, I mean, eventuates in this nonsense in the Jefferson Elementary School in Berkeley the other day. And also with the writing of Professor Chomsky, who's a very important figure on the American left. Though he calls himself an anarchist, he keeps forgetting that he is one at just the moments it might do him some good. But he is, at any rate, of major influence on the American left. And I realized a few years ago that there was a difference between him, Professor Chomsky, I mean, and myself. He did not finally think that the United States of America was a good idea. He thought it had been sort of all genocide since Columbus, basically. I mean, that's not simplifying his opinion by very much. And as I said about the Berkeley motion to change the name of the school to Sequoia, in a way, it doesn't make any difference. You know, it's a radical attitude, but it's not a radical position because it doesn't commit you to anything. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't represent anything. Actually, there are times when it can have significance. If you basically think the United States is a bad idea, then you may feel a sneaking sympathy for others who feel the same, such as, for example, theocratic nihilists, who believe it's a Crusader Jewish racket. And of course, it's very important that people make up their minds about this now and stop fooling around about it, wouldn't you say?
Yes, but so to sum up, would you say then that your view of Jefferson has been consistent over time, that you at no point ever subscribed to that, what you call Berkeley interpretation?
No, I never was a period in my life when I thought that. I always wanted to come to the United States. I had a very strong ambition to come here and identification with it. Well, I guess I haven't quite answered the second half of your question, which is this: what difference has it made studying him more? I tell you what, I mean, about the slavery stuff, which everyone thinks they know about, and everyone does know about, so it's a great deal worse than I had ever suspected. Because it's not just his failure to abolish it, it's his effective commitment to extend it and prolong it and and deepen and entrench it. That's inescapable. If you decide that you're not going to get rid of a thing like that, you're not in fact taking a neutral position. You're not saying, well, we can't do it now, we'll do it some other time. You're making the other decision. You're saying, no, we're going to continue with it and all those implications, up to and including a civil war in which the whole republic might be destroyed. So it's very, very difficult to overstate how ghastly that is. And I certainly had not understood that element of it. But the Enlightenment ideas persist in their own right, it seems to me, and are the negation of some of these practices. So there's that much to play for. Yeah.
Is the author of America.
Can you give it some weight?
Sure. If Thomas Jefferson is the author of America, what do you think? What do you think today he would think of his work so far?
What would he think of it? Well, I've given up on this. Writing about George Orwell persuaded me not to do this, if you don't mind, because people will keep on saying, well, what would Orwell say about this or that? And I think you can do it up to a certain point. Orwell died, unfortunately, only when he was 46. And I think I was strong enough to claim that I knew and could prove that he would not have supported the war in Vietnam, which Norman Podhoretz and other neoconservatives said they thought he would. Because he could have been alive for it, and he had enough knowledge of and dislike for European colonialism in Asia, very intense dislike, and he would have known enough to know, already in fact in his late writings from Paris in the 40s, did know enough to know that French colonialism was being restored in Indochina after the war. And everyone knows, or if they don't know, they should know, that the American war in Vietnam is a mere extension, an attempt to prolong the life of French colonialism in Indochina. So I think I could reasonably make a case that I did know, would say what he would have said about that. But I couldn't have said what he would have said about the Iraq War, for example. It would only be guesswork. However, there was a symposium on biography recently at the Smithsonian, which I was asked to, with greatly superior firepower. Michael Corder, for example, whose book on Ulysses Grant is in the same series, and Francine Prose, I believe, and some others. And Michael Corder said, look, one thing a biographer must never do is say, at this point he must have thought, or at that moment he must have realized, or he must have felt. You must never do it. It undermines your integrity as an author. It goes farther than you can possibly know. Give it up. And I thought, well, I've heard that before, and I've always agreed with it. I've always nodded at the right place. It's a completely respectable opinion. But I had to say that I am certain that I know what Jefferson thought when he first saw Sally Hemings arrive in Paris. I don't know anything about anything if I don't know what he thought, and what he thought was, maybe for the only time in his life, oh man, there is a God. That's what he thought. Wow, was what he thought. I think one has to do it sometimes. If he could see the United States today, I think the thing that would most amaze him would actually be the position of women. It's very interesting how little he pays attention to that, how he takes for granted the place, the domestic place of women. American womanhood would amaze him now, and stir him, I think, a bit, but it would absolutely astound him. I need some more water if someone can get me that, or something liquid. Yeah. Sir?
How would you characterize the legacy of Alexander Hamilton?
Well, Hamilton is someone about whom Jefferson is consistently unfair. And though I think, I believe that you couldn't have had the United States without Jefferson, it's probably fair to say that you couldn't have had it without Jefferson plus Hamilton, because Jefferson really does believe, in a way, in the agrarian future. The rural and bucolic society and the small community, partly owning chattel slaves, and partly small enough to conduct business intimately. Whereas Hamilton correctly sees that the future of the United States is mercantile and for free trade and business and urbanization. And Jefferson's one of the, and a bank. And Jefferson's one of those people, I think, who probably deep down thought that paper money was immoral, just somehow unsound. If you can't bite it, it's not cash. And took a very reactionary attitude on all this. But as with everything else, would compromise if he thought it would advance the general cause. And he said to Hamilton effectively, well, you can have your economic policy if we can have the capital in Virginia, which is why we're stuck here today. And Hamilton was very critical of the Louisiana Purchase, but as was Adams, but I think probably because they were furious that they hadn't been able to do it themselves, to be fair to them. Ron Chernow's book on Hamilton I thought was excellent, I must say. It was full of very, very useful information. And you have to say, Jefferson was a very cold person, as I've said before, very ruthless, almost Leninist in his ruthlessness. And I think he was almost publicly pleased when Aaron Burr killed Hamilton. He really hated him and suspected Hamilton of being partly black. Caribbean upstart immigrant, which, by the way, Hamilton may have been, we don't know. But Jefferson really thought of him as a total inferior and was as mean about him as he could be. And you see a lot of the noir side of Jefferson's character from studying his relations with Hamilton.